Before we look at our next topic, we need to know what countries make up the UK. So can you name the 4 countries in the UK? And the answers are England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, not the Republic of Ireland though. So what we're looking at now is something called devolution. See if you can find a definition. This part of the topic is called regional and devolved government. So we need to look at a definition of devolution, any possible problems with it, and what that means for the devolved nations, so for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. So what is devolution then? Well, it started really from 1999. And in devolution, it's this process of the UK Parliament, Westminster, Houses of Parliament, giving away powers to the other nations. So in Northern Ireland, they've got what's called an Assembly, the same as Cardiff. And then in Scotland, they've got their own Parliament, which is more powerful because they can make their own laws and change taxes. So devolution is literally the giving away of powers, the transfer of powers from UK Parliament to the other countries. It also can give powers to local councils. A good way of looking at devolution is what's happened over coronavirus. So, for example, each of the 4 devolved nations has got their own separate rules on what you can and can't do. For example, it's only been in the past week that Wales have made you have to wear masks. Before that, you didn't. In Scotland, they had much harsher rules on quarantining from when you came back from holiday. And they've also had stricter rules on wearing masks in schools and lockdowns in universities compared to England, because all of them have got power over their own health systems. You could also say the same with councils too. For example, I live in Wolverhampton. It's now the end of September 2020 and we're under stricter restrictions than you guys are in Dudley. We're not allowed into each other's houses because our council has decided that, whereas Dudley are staying with the main rule of 6. So, public votes were held to decide what should happen with this devolution. And because of that, we got created these parliaments and assemblies. In Northern Ireland, there's some of the things that they're responsible for. In Scotland, they've got their own parliament, like I said earlier, and that means they can change laws and taxes. That's rarely used. However, in Scotland, they have a few things free that us in England don't, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And for Wales, that's what their assembly can be in charge of. So, why does this lead to problems then? Well, there's some things that can happen in one country that can't in another. For example, in Scotland, they've abolished university tuition fees and prescription charges. So if you wanted to go to university in Scotland, then you don't have those thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of fees to pay years later. However, if you live in England, Wales or Northern Ireland, you still do. The same with prescription charges. Every time you get a medicine from the doctor, you have to pay a nominal fee of about £9.60 for your tablets or whatever it is. It doesn't pay the whole bill, but it is a contribution to the NHS. In Scotland, you don't pay for prescription charges. And again, this can cause massive arguments because a lot of people say, well, it's not fair. Scotland are spending our taxpayers' money on stuff for them and their people. It's not fair. However, every single country will get the same amount of tax money. That's just what Scotland have decided to spend theirs on. But it still creates this kind of feeling of unjustness. The next issue you've got is something called English votes for English laws. Because the Scottish people have got more power, and the reason they've got more power was due to a referendum that was held in 2014. Remember, a referendum is a vote on one issue. The referendum was held to see if they wanted to leave the UK altogether, if they wanted to be their own independent country. In the referendum, they voted no by 55%. So it was quite close, but they still voted no, and because of this, the UK Parliament offered them more powers. So we gave them more powers. But then we said, well, some right-wing, particularly Tory MPs, said, if you want your own powers, you want your own parliament, that's fine. But when we're in Parliament and we're voting on issues that only affect England, then the Scottish MPs shouldn't have a vote, they shouldn't have a say-so. So, for example, maybe something like HS2 that's really only going to be in England, they would argue that Scottish MPs shouldn't get to vote on it. This caused a really, really big issue because a lot of particularly Labour MPs said, no, we can't have that. We need to be unified. We need to be together. It's undemocratic. Those MPs have been voted into the House of Parliament. They have got to be responsible for making decisions that the whole House of Parliament does. So, what do you think? Should UK tax pay for Scottish only rules or Welsh only rules or Irish only rules? Should there be a devolved parliament, and why do you think there isn't? You're going to do a 4-mark question now. We're using the information on the last few slides as our source, and the question says, describe 2 reasons why devolution has caused problems for the UK Parliament. If I was you, I might do 1 point on the services that are free in Scotland and how that might cause issues with Parliament. The other one I'll talk about is the English votes for English laws. Remember, in a 4-mark question, you make your point, you give your evidence, and you explain it. You need 2 points, 2 paragraphs, fully explained to get you 4 out of 4. So do you think devolution should stop or go further? Remember, with Brexit, Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU, but they were forced to leave because the rest of the UK voted leave. Could that cause them to want to leave even further? Coronavirus, we've all had our own decisions. Could that make people, the devolved nations, less or more committed to the UK Parliament? And what benefits do you think being in the UK actually brings? Why would we want to stay together?